it's Sonjel here from the Baha'i Blog team. Today I'm joined by Farideh, and I thought we could have a conversation about body image, motherhood, comedy, songwriting, since that's what you do. I have to admit, Farideh, that if I met you on the playground, like if our kids were playing together, I'd probably push myself to come out of my shell and be like, can I have your number? Can we hang out sometime? I've taken a lot of joy out of the content that you've shared online.
Oh, thank you. I have a lot of fun doing it.
I thought that maybe we could start with talking about body positivity or accepting one's body. I know that in Australia, Taryn Brumfitt was just named Australian of the Year, and she created a documentary called Embrace, which is a really cool film. And one of the things I took away from that film when I watched it many years ago was this idea that if we chase an ideal body image, we're never going to get there anyway. Like even if you devote yourself to it full time, which she did, it's just never, it's an impossible
Right. There's no,
milestone.
it's never gonna happen. Right. Cause like then you're always just, unless, and also honestly, what a waste of a life. That's how I feel about it. Sometimes, like certainly, and I have definitely had times in my life where like to get to that ideal body consumed almost every thought, and I think that's just like not what as spiritual creatures here. Like, there's no like Abdul Baha wasn't like, now you need to count your calories every day. Like obviously we're supposed to take care of our human temple, but. I don't think some people just happen to have bodies that fit what is an acceptable body. And they don't understand that when you have a body that doesn't fit an acceptable body, in order to get there, it's not like just eating your vegetables. It means like every moment is dedicated to, how many bites have I eaten? Like I have lived where I've eaten like 714 calories of protein and 700 calories of this, and then like if you didn't make it, like like, and just that's for me where I kind of had came with was like, actually if all these women, because it's primarily women, I mean as far as my experience, I don't know, I generally when my conversation with men, it's not revealed to me that that's a common thing, though I think that there is whole gym bro stuff, and there's definitely body stuff there. So I'm going to speak from example of women. Generally, I think if most women have issues with this, so like if all of their thoughts, or even 20% or 30%, that's too many thoughts not being put into prayer, the service of mankind, the the movement of their spirit, like it's a waste of time. Like I like in that to that extreme, right? Because in some ways that's moving into that's not putting our lives and our body in the hands of Baha'u'llah. And anyway, so that's yeah. so I wrote a song like there's 1,000,001 better things to do with your time than a diet, because it's not that just stuff doesn't come up with me. Like that diet culture is so strong, and I'm only beginning to understand its implications, and then of course its implications and as far as what we come to understand about race, and what we come to understand about prejudice, about some bodies being acceptable and some bodies not being acceptable, and how we judge bodies, and when we're trying to work towards like the perfect body, we're exploring in ourselves that other bodies aren't acceptable, and including ours, right? And so it's a journey I'm on. I'm no expert, but certainly I've had my own personal experience with trying to make my body smaller, as small as humanly possible. And for me, in my personal situation, my body just rebelled. It refused. Yeah. And so what happened was I was trying to engage in diet culture, and then I was becoming sicker. And then my body was thinking, you know what, let's gain 40 pounds. And I'm like, what is happening? Like I'm doing everything right. And then, just having to be like, okay, so I have to listen to what my body's telling me, which is, nah, we ain't doing this. So I'm okay. Which has been such a great teacher. It's really helped me realize, like, well, this thoughts of, Abdul Baha talks about how what we think about influences us. And so we need to spend time thinking about the spiritual. And this is a very material thing, at least for me. You know, like I think that there's other people whose life passions are in there. So thinking, you know, working out every day, 6 hours a day, like if you're an Olympian or a gym person or a nutritionist, like with their food, like that makes sense for you. But for someone like me, that's not moderation.
That's right. And I think that we live in a very materialistic society, but it took me a while to realize that obsessing about my body is a form of materialism.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Right. And so, like, I have 3 daughters, and from the outset, I kind of decided, like, I don't want to pass on to them any ideas that their bodies are not good for them, or that their bodies aren't perfect. I really want to raise them thinking, I have an incredible body, and this is my body, and it's great just the way it is, and it's going to change. Bodies change over time. Bodies change in a lifetime, and it's all acceptable and wonderful. And I feel like I've put a lot of energy into trying to do that, but what goes on in my head isn't quite there. Like the self-talk about my body still isn't there. And I tried, like you said, I try to tell myself, like, this is a waste of my thought. This is a waste of my time. This is a waste of my energy, and I should be thinking about other things. But there is still that feeling sometimes when I see myself in the mirror and I'm like, who are you? Like, where did you come from?
Yeah, this is what I planned. And you can feel kind of out of control. And, you know, I think there's also this, so there's body positivity, but there's also this other movement, which I really like, which is called body neutrality.
Yes.
Which is kind of just being like, yeah, it's a body.
It's like the Switzerland of body issues. It's just
like, yeah, that's what it looks like. I don't have to love it. I don't have to hate it. And I think that also is really like, because sometimes getting to love your body is kind of like so far away from our feelings. Sometimes just accepting is a powerful thing. And yeah, it's very interesting. And yeah, how we teach our children about food and our bodies is a whole different thing. I happen to have a child who doesn't like to eat. And I realized I did a lot of research on what I was supposed to do, and I realized that without knowing it, because of my upbringing and because of my personal experience, when I was worried about her eating, diet culture was coming through. You know, like you have to eat, like we have to eat healthy. You can't just eat junk. So then we create these dichotomies in food. And obviously I'm still at the beginning of my journey. Anybody's welcome to like actually learn from nutritionists and how they talk about how we don't villainize food anymore, because it creates these kind of like, this is good, this is bad, which is actually which is diet culture. And I was like, my goodness. And, you know, and this is another place where we just have to accept, I have to accept that in my particular situation, forcing my child to eat vegetables is because of who I am and my own background. When I'm trying to control that, it's not loving. What comes through is diet culture. And that is a controlling, materialistic, and also it comes from a place of, you know, it's control and fear. And so I have to just be like, this isn't working. It's been quite a journey. So yeah, people like, what was her name again? Tuffy? Or was it?
Karen Brumfitt.
Karen Brumfitt. Yeah, they're doing important work where we kind of really examine how are we using our time, and billions of dollars and all these things, when we're like, this is in the scheme of important things. You know, and also it's interesting as we're learning more and more about obesity or being overweight, new research that shows that a lot of our old science is based on prejudice. Is based on prejudice. So as we're coming to learn about what are the actual impacts of obesity, of overweightness, of being overweight, the guidelines of how bad it is for your health are changing as scientists are working on their prejudice. So I always think that's really interesting when we look at how like science and religion agree, when the challenge is when scientists are bringing in prejudice without knowing it, because you don't examine it until the culture continues, and then you're like, oh wait, we were looking for, if you're obese, you're lazy and gluttonous. That's what we were looking for. And so we just found things that confirm that. Yeah.
Actually, I think that's a really good segue to comedy, because I feel like in Western society, comedians are often able to spell it out how it is. kind of
Mm.
like this Shakespearean idea that the court jester can tell the king what's going on in a way that all of the other subjects are too afraid to say it. And
Mm.
I feel like comedians can really tap into a lot of issues, and because it makes us laugh, it's a safe place for us to explore these ideas.
Yeah. So, just for background for people, my background is in being a musician. I've been a musician my whole life. Um, for those of people who are Baha'is, they might know my work is through Manira Sparrow. I do some Baha'i writings that I put to music. And it's only since, well, in my knowledge anyway, in what I experienced was I only really started exploring comedy since the lockdown.
Hmm.
I started exploring that art form. And I was like, I was in a place where I felt like my life had truly changed, and I was like, I do not know what's happening. What is happening? Why am I exploring this new modality
Hmm.
of comedy? Like, I'm like, where is this coming from? Since come to understand that I've been exploring it my whole life. But when I started learning about what is comedy, what makes how where do comedic ideas come from? It comes from the truth. So
Yeah.
you're always starting with the truth, and that the truth is funny. Who knew? Which is very similar to music, because you're always trying to speak about your personal truth, about like what's a true
Yes.
feeling for you. So I was like, oh, actually, these aren't too far apart. But you're right. Like certain things are just more palatable when we're also laughing about them. And but you are pointing out, um, a society like an issue. And whether it's, sometimes people are telling the truth about like printing paper or whatever, but a lot of times they're speaking about societal issues in a way that's funny for us to, and it, how like we're supposed to have words as mild as milk.
Yes.
It's kind of like a way to make something that's quite difficult and maybe like horrible, um, but make people think. And so it's been interesting too, because I think that sometimes people say that there's certain things we just can't joke about.
Hmm.
And I think that that's probably true. In my situation, I was seeing people talk like one of the things along with body image I talk about is gender inequality, specifically inside of marriage, like heterosexual marriage. And I think that there are some creators who feel like we shouldn't be joking about it because it's just so serious, like it's such a systemic issue. And I'm like, well, if we don't joke about it, it's not actually going to reach enough people, because if it's always serious, like the thing is, okay, so in particular I'm talking about the gender dynamic where a lot of moms are responsible for all the childcare and the husbands are not, and they just kind of they perhaps they have a perception that they're doing a lot when really most wives would say like no, they're not doing even 80%, 20%. And so this dynamic, and um so they already have their wives speaking seriously to them, asking them to step up into their marriage. So there's already a serious conversation. It's not moving ahead the needle. So when we have a like more of a comedic understanding, where we're uh, drawing attention to that, I think that it has more of like an ability to kind of get inside and be an earworm and really think about it and ponder. It's a very interesting art form. I've been really enjoying getting to know it.
Well, your song's such a good Tad. Like, I think you have 10 million views
Yeah,
for that song.
yeah, it's Silver Town Mill. It's very surprising, like it's such a funny thing when you create a piece of work and you just think, well, that's not very good. Like oh well, that's all I got today. I'm just gonna put it out and it like goes viral, and you're like, whoa, okay, this like really resonated with people. It really resonated with people. The feeling of that the mom can do it. Well, I mean, this is looking at how in our society there's like I think it's something like 92 ways in which we judge whether a woman is a good mother.
Yeah.
And we judge men by one standard, which is he there? Like, did he abandon his children or not? And if he didn't abandon his children, he's a good dad. Whereas a woman has to be, make sure every piece of their hygiene, their mental health, their spiritual, like that their hair is brushed, their hair is washed, like, that they're dressed warm enough or cool. Like, there's just so many. And so it leads most women to feel like they're failing, but also it means that when men are outside with their children doing anything,
Yeah.
they are praised. And like, wow, you're an amazing dad. And you're like, yes, he's so brave pushing this stroller. You know? And So yeah, it's been very it's interesting to see what resonates with people, and also it's about like speaking the truth.
Yeah.
And uh I think that many, in particular the women I'm who follow me and who I talk to, they're very isolated. So
Yes.
they don't know that this is actually not just their marriage, not just their experience. It's like most women's around the world.
Yeah. It's funny because I saw it like in a friend group on Facebook. Um, and a friend group where I know the mother's partners and I know that they're active fathers. And so the mom who shared it was like, I love my partner and I think he's a great father. But this is still really funny because people have said that. People have approached him and said that. And I
Yeah,
don't think I've ever been approached by anyone who said you're a good mom.
no, no, yeah, exactly. Nobody would be like, wow, you're grocery shopping with your kids. What? Like, you're amazing. Round of applause.
The most I've gotten is, you got your hands full.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I do. Could you help a little?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, as if I somehow made this mess that I am in.
I know, right? Exactly. It kind of comes with a judgment, like you've got your hands full, young. Why? Yeah, exactly. Could you help me? Or just like, yeah, exactly. You're like, yes, it's a bounty. It's a real bounty. Well, yeah, it's interesting because I also released a song recently called like "You're a Good Mom,"
Yes.
and I talked about the ways in which I feel like I don't um, measure up as a mom, but I say like I'm a good mom, not a perfect mom.
Hmm.
And then like we don't need to be perfect moms, but most moms are so hard on themselves and the standard is so high, so most people responded like I feel so seen. But like, so the lines are like, my kid only eats macaroni, her face is always looking at a screen, um, I rarely read her books before bedtime, and I often forget to brush her teeth. And so those are particular ways in which I struggle. So most people were like, I feel seen. But then there were quite a few very judgmental conversation, like comments from other mothers, like call CPS, which is in America, like protective services.
Yeah.
This is just lazy parenting. Like it's your job to be everything for them. And I
Hmm.
just thought, wow, so interesting. Because if I was a man who had released that song, people would have asked in the comments, either they would have praised me for just doing what I could, or B, they would have told me, they would have asked, where was my wife in this? How was
Yeah.
she supporting me in the places where I couldn't? But nobody asked. Like, okay, but your husband can brush teeth. Your husband can read books. Like this is a balance between the two. And I mean,
Hmm.
in our situation, of course, like, I'm so grateful that my husband is so confident, and because I'm taking these critiques, and a lot of times they are from moments in our marriage, especially when our child was young, and we're not in those things, but we had a lot of conversations about gender equality. We had a lot of, creating understanding through consultation. But yeah, like it was so, like in our situation, those are the ways in which I struggle are also ways in which he struggles. So nobody is there to pick up the weight, and that's okay. Like, she's still having an amazing childhood. She is still loved and cared for. She's not neglected in any way. But it was just very interesting to see, well, one, how mothers can judge each other so harshly,
Yeah.
and but also that it didn't occur to anyone. Like, I mean, 500,000 people viewed that. I mean, almost a million, actually, if you look at two things, and nobody asked, well, okay, but your husband could do some of that.
Yeah. Right. Well,
Yeah,
and
which is,
talking.
yeah,
No, go ahead.
which is fine. But if it was a man who had released that song, I just think it would have been 500,000 comments. Where's your wife and all of this?
100%. Well, and talking about it is making me realize it's another one of these materialistic pitfalls where perfection can never be achieved at all.
That's right. And the more you try to be a perfect mom, the more actually imperfect you would become, right? Like,
100%.
kind of the idea is like, whenever I try and control my daughter's eating is when actually diet culture comes through.
Yeah.
Whenever I, like, there's this moderation even in all things, even with, yeah. And also it's kind of this idea that obviously brushing teeth is important, reading books are important, but we also have a village, right? So she goes to
Yeah.
school, she has my husband will read with her sometimes, my friends, and my mom reads with her, so there's a whole village. But also there's this idea that if she brushes her teeth every day and eats macaroni and eats vegetables, then she will be a happy and healthy adult. And we know that that's not the case. Like a healthy adult has nothing to do. Like literally, you could never brush your teeth, and you may be a better, like happier person inside that has greater connect, like has more of a spiritual identity, is a greater servant to mankind. Like that, it's not the surface that we're working on as parents. We're trying to do, um, bring out these gems that are inside our babies.
Yeah. And I found like when I hit rock bottom and then I really say my prayers, I'm a much better parent. And I'm like, oh, why don't I just get better at my devotional life when I'm not in a moment of crises? Because I will be a much better person. And then sometimes I think in my role as a parent, like, who is really training who? Like, am I really training my children, or am I being trained? But this is what patience looks like. This is what forgiveness looks like. This is what unconditional love looks like. And this is what turning to God when you're like, I got nothing. Like, I don't know what to do anymore.
Yeah, I got nothing. They take everything. Yeah, I think that makes sense actually, even with if I think about my own experience with trying to figure out her food and my own examination of diet culture, it was another way to turn it over and learn to trust, because part of it was like when you're raised in diet culture, you do not trust yourself or your body to feed yourself.
Yeah.
And so the books that I was reading, the nutritionists I was talking about, was that I had to show her that I trusted her to feed herself, so that over time right now she does trust herself. She just thinks I'm wrong. But so that I feed that trust, that she always knows, so that I don't derail her appetite. I don't like with those, because then if I do, then what comes through, and why this is a concern to me is that because my daughter already has an inclination to not eat. I think that if I add diet culture on there, the greater risk beyond nutrition is actually eating disorders, and that's
100%.
that's a very fatal, like difficult thing. So I would rather her not eat a vegetable for 18 years than have an eating disorder, right? And but when I think about like what has she taught me? Well, firstly, there were ways in which I didn't even know, even if I'd spent like the last decade trying to pull the thorns of diet culture out of me, here it was again, like so revealing to me, oh yeah, here it is again. And just turning it over, being like, this, I can't, like truly, I can't be everything to my child. And so I have to give it to God to be like, okay, please forgive me as a parent. I'm not going to be able to be everything to her. And even with all these people around her, like, we're not going to do it perfectly. This is an imperfect world. And all I can do is just be like, and you want to do it perfectly, right? Like, you just want to so bad. You don't want to mess up with your kids. But the reality is that we are human. And if we weren't going to make mistakes, God wouldn't have made us human.
That's right. My middle child made me a Mother's Day card, and it says, my mother likes to bake. My mother makes mistakes. And I was like, I do. I really do. I make a lot of mistakes on a daily basis. But backpedaling a little bit to what you were talking about judging other mothers, I've learned in my decade as a mother that for everything I have judged another mother, that just comes right back to me. And I find myself in that very position of the mother that I judged. Or the times I was like, how could you why is your house such a mess? Can't you keep this clean? And then I look around and I'm like, oh, I'm here now. I'm the one with the messy house. Or how could you let your kid go out in that costume when it's not a day to be? And there I am with 3 children dressed up like astronauts and ballerinas on a regular day. So I find myself, because the inclination is there. It's a really strong inclination to look at other mothers and be like, well, she's not doing that correctly. And now I just stop it. I'm like, she's a wonderful mom. Everybody's doing the best that they can.
Yeah,
I really don't want to be.
Well, it also comes back to like a lot of mothers are so alone in a job that is huge.
Yeah.
It's just so huge, right? So they're like, well, yeah, nobody's there to clean that house. And those kids, I mean, they can destroy a home in 15 seconds. They're very good at it. right? And so once again, it helps us like, what does it matter that your house is dirty? Like when we really look at like what's beyond the surface, like your kids' house are dirty because they were happy and
Yeah.
they were playing and they felt like safe enough to be free enough to be in their home and create.
Yeah.
Which I mean, it's horrible. It's horrible. This is chaos. You're just living in chaos. But once again, yeah, I can see how it like helps us turn it over to God and just be like, yeah, you're keeping what's important. What's important? Well, it's my relationship with my kids, and then I have a safe environment, and I can say my prayers to overcome the chaos of this moment.
So why do you think we have this pressure to be perfect, to have perfect bodies, to be perfect mothers, and to somehow have it all, to like work and be parents, like enjoy every moment of motherhood, but also somehow be successful in the world? What do we do with that?
I don't know exactly how, like I'm sure that if I looked into like the history of like philosophy, there would be some ideas. But I certainly like one of the things I think about when I'm um thinking about like why is this so hard and why are women alone? And I think that has to do with it. The equality of men and women will occur over multiple generations.
Mm.
And so truly childcare, um house care, like all those things have been largely invisible to the world, like to the greater, it's been like women isolated alone, or that previously there have been more like help through um you know like unpaid labor,
Yes.
but I think that like truly I'm just going to speak about it in my own marriage. How I come to understand it is like for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, or like however since we've had this constructive this kind of family arrangement, um this work has been invisible to men. And so it's going to take time and lots of conversations to help build that bridge of understanding. And so right now we just have these impossible standards of we keep the perfect home and we take care of the kids and we're responsible for them and we go and succeed in the world. And I think that as women have more power financially because of those work, there is a greater understanding that's growing as women, like we see women come forward like Shonda Rhimes, and she had like she's a writer for like Grey's Anatomy. She had like a speech where she talked about like when you see me succeeding here, know I am failing at home. When you see I'm succeeding at home, know that I'm failing at work. And so the more we see women with power coming through and saying these things, and normalizing it, I think that helps. And as we have conversations with our partner, I think that helps. The judgment of other women, I think that in general, like this is all about feeling safe. We don't feel safe when a woman isn't like meeting the standards, right? Like
Mm.
fat bodies make us scared. They make us scared that we could become one because fat bodies are not treated very well in our society.
Yeah.
And so we just wonder why they're doing it. And we've been told a bunch of, prejudice stuff that says like, oh, they are the way they are because they're lazy and they eat too much,
Mm.
which is just like not always the case. And also it's just a spiritual judgment that we've made on the outside when really there's so many things that go into fatness. And same thing with motherhood. Like we've been told that if you're a good mom, you do all those things. So when they don't do those things, then you're like, well, she must not be a good mom. So that's what I've come to understand. I'm just at the beginning of my learning. I don't really know much, but that's how when I ponder into the great depths, those are the things that come up, I think.
Yeah. But it's interesting because I think a lot of people on the surface would say, oh, yeah, equality of women and men totally achieved. But
I certainly did. I certainly did. Well, I thought we were much closer. And then I became a mom and I was like, whoa.
right?
I was living like a man before I had children, basically. I was like,
There's
oh,
there's the slogan for the t-shirt.
yeah, exactly. Before I became a mom, I was living like a man. I was like, oh. And then I became a mom, and then I was like, oh, now I am truly my gender. And now I see I'm the bottom rung of society,
Yeah.
harshly judged, no support. People will think that they're being supportive of you in your career or in your marriage, but like there's there's no awareness. You're like,
Yeah.
you're kind of being, especially if you work in my particular situation, I was a touring musician at the time. So they thought by allowing me in the space, they were being supportive. And it's just like, well, no, just allowing me to be here is not actually supportive, because how to get, like, even to work, to do a show
Yeah.
takes me so much more work than it does for just anybody. So
Yeah. This is a lot of good stuff. Good stuff to think about. Can we talk about your mom bod anthem? Because
oh yeah, sure.
I thought that song was fantastic. One, because I think that there's a trope now about the dad bod, and like
Oh
that's
yeah.
okay, that their bodies change from their youth into fatherhood, and that's totally fine. But there's no such thing as a mom bod. Like, that's not an accepted thing, because you're supposed to bounce back. You're supposed to be like young forever.
Yeah, totally, right? There's this idea that you are not supposed to age. And if you are aging physically, or like your body is changing, yeah, so it came from this praise of dad bods, which, yeah, great. That's awesome. I love that people are celebrating dad bods. But there's, like you said, literally nobody celebrating a mom bod. Nobody thinking like cellulite is okay, or that like postpartum scars are fine, or like that your body, it changes. Like it's, you're not supposed to look like 19 your whole life. You're not supposed to look like 21. Your body is not meant to. I mean, there are, well, okay, I'm going to say, I don't want to speak in absolutes, because I think there are some people whose body does stay the same. But that's not because they're like I have a friend like that whose just body is just same when I met her 10 years ago. I've seen her eat everything in her past, and I've seen her look healthy, eat healthy. She looks exactly the same. But so it's not like she's not forcing her body to look 19. It just does.
Yeah.
But I would say for the vast majority, that's just not the case. Your body's just had a baby and is now has a mind of its own. And especially like with a mom bod, like the thing is that one thing I think is really interesting that's kind of missing from our dialogue in society is that like having children is dangerous. It is hard on the body. Like I go through bouts where I can't walk for a week every 3 months. People lose their teeth. And there's a whole body of medicine just dedicated to this time. And women are like meant to keep working during this time. They are, there's all these pressures, and then to bounce back from it when they're like sleep deprived and have an infant, like the so it's interesting because you're like, well, yeah, dad bods are great, but like literally my body is magic. Like I went and, I feel like when I gave birth, I went to the other side and I pulled a soul through. Like like there's time when you're giving birth where you're like, I'm gonna die, and they're like, yeah, that means it's about to happen. You're like, what kind of world do we live in where we're like, yeah, you're about to die, you feel like you're gonna die, that's the moment you're gonna give birth, right? Like, and so it's like my body is magic. Like I literally, it's this act of love where you give even your whole body to another person. Like you give your baby everything you have, the blood, like your youth. Like and then they just suck it dry.
It's true. Like in pregnancy and in the delivery and in the years that follow. Like it's not like
Yeah.
magically you go back to no.
They're like your own little Death Eaters,
Yeah. Sometimes my kids will come in, this may be TMI for this, but they'll come in, they'll like slap my belly. And I was like, that was a house. Like you lived there. Like, isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, and the great thing is that like you're showing them body neutrality in your way. Like, yeah, this was a house. Like that our bodies are not, just to look perfect. They are acts of love. They are this home for our kids, and they are the arms that hold them, and the bodies that they snuggle into, and that is the best use of our body is to love.
Yeah, that's true. I do think about that sometimes. I'm like, yeah, these arms, like this body is a lot different than it was before, but it's also a lot softer than it was before.
And it's seen some stuff, like it's been to hell and back,
Yeah. Oh, 100%. It's funny you mentioned that about dying, because I really did. I wanted to die. That's my first one. I asked Bahal, I was like, please, I am perfectly content with going now. I can go.
Take me now, Lord.
And then he didn't. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll try one more push. Well, thank you so much for spending this time with me and
Hey,
chatting
that
about
was so
these
much
things.
fun.
I've
Yeah,
loved
it
this
was really good.
conversation. Thank you.
And yeah, I just want to say, like, if you're a Baha'i and you really want to listen to Manira Sparrow, that's check it out on all streaming platforms. It's really nice work, but I don't always didn't get to tour around the world, so not everybody knows about it.
Sounds good. I'll make sure to include the information in the
Cool.
description.
Thanks, Sonjel. This was a really good time.
It was wonderful. Happy Ayamiha.
Happy Yamiha. Talk to you soon.
Bye.